Perhaps I can initiate some, and I'll probably just stand here if you guys can hear me. I also would encourage the panel to considering I mean there are some of us are not lawyers to also tackle issues in more generic ways in explaining the situation from other perspectives as well. So some of these kind of questions would be, I mean, some are questions that are coming out of my own experiences when Fahad and Rafi were discussing some of the predicaments. I was also thinking about my experience at the Foreign Office and perhaps from an international law perspective, and I had to deal with certain environmental law queries or environmental related treaties. And perhaps I can sort of throw these out as well as perhaps questions. But I mean, I was particularly, and perhaps the first question to both Rafi and Adi Sultan, because I know they are working in this area as focusing on federalism. I was quite interested in this understanding of federalism now evolving as a consequence of, or now facing issues that relate to the environment. Because this is something I've also focused on, and for me, federalism, if it stems from some form of liberalism that was present at the time Pakistan and India were created, was looking at ethnic federalism and political federalism, and divisions were based on, or powers were sort of divided because of those considerations. But naturally, as we move forward, socioeconomic rights have become more important. Also, centralization based on national security concerns and globalization have become more important. So I would like to raise this question of whether all of this discussion is perhaps being motivated by that civil political framework in place. And even in Western countries, after you see now, that a lot of these are becoming federal subject matters because of the fact that they consider their identity that of a civic identity. It's not ethnic identity anymore. For example, in the US, when they're looking at the environment, they're looking at foreign relations, water, for example, and my question to Sufi Saab perhaps would be on this issue, that water for Pakistan, if even viewed as an environmental issue, because if we sort of, I mean, this is something that we worked on in the sort of underwater context in terms of our disputes with India on Kishan Ganga, water, the court or the Court of Arbitration was focusing on the environmental effect of diverting water. So for Pakistan, it is also a national security issue. It's a federal issue. It's a foreign affairs related issue. And so that is one of the questions I had in mind. Anyways, I mean, there are a bunch of questions with Fahad. I think the questions I have are more general in ways that would be covering everyone's expertise. Also, before I actually allow, or actually that wouldn't be the right word, invite Rafi, so I just wanted to say something about my experience at the Foreign Office, because I think that's an absolutely correct assessment of our understanding as a dualist state, right? All international commitments have to be locally implemented. And what understanding within the Foreign Office of that particular I guess understanding was quite equivocal, because there were a number of treaties we were signing, and we were signing them and we were writing, and the treaty was written, this treaty will enter into force upon signature, right? But that means from an international law perspective, we were bound, but from a domestic perspective, that treaty had no legal value because there was no ratification. And when the ratification question came up, there's also a lot of confusion of what is an international agreement and a treaty. So for example, if you enter into an arrangement with, let's say, Turkey on setting up some sort of a cultural center in Pakistan, do we have to go to the cabinet for ratification, or does just the division tell us that, they're given their assent, and as a consequence, we are entered into a binding treaty, or, we have international commitments. But this is an issue, and also the issue is mostly, becomes highly apparent when there's an actual dispute that arises. And so, Rafi, I don't know if you know about this, but this is very interesting because this is what I was exposed to at the Foreign Office. is that the very first day at work, I was basically told that, okay, in the province of Balochistan and Sindh, certain Arab sheikhs wanted to hunt with and wanted to like buy falcons, and that was covered under a particular treaty, as we couldn't trade in that or use falcons in that particular way. But the federal government, and perhaps it was Balochistan as well as some NGOs who raised this, but their incentives were different, like the GSP Plus issue, and they were like, no, we have to do this, and let's try to somehow find a solution to this, right? So that became a treaty that became prominent for that particular imperative, okay? Naturally, I think when Rafi was pointing out all these other treaties, they probably have more local relevance for some provinces over the other, or perhaps, I don't know, the due diligence is done in a particular way. I'm just curious about that. So anyways, I'll leave it at that, and then have other questions, and then perhaps the audience has questions. So the floor is to you guys. Rafi, maybe you want to start with that? Or?
Thank you, Sikandar. I just want to talk about federalism and water a bit, because it's a topical question. मैं वकील हूँ, right? I'm not. There are 32 sections in the Environment Protection Act. All of us can become experts in these. ठीक है, बड़ी बात नहीं. मैं वकील हूँ, मैं environment को इतनी अच्छी तरह, मैं पानी को, I'm not a hydrologist. I don't know how dams work, and nor do I pretend this, or nor should we. मगर मुझे पानी के experts कहते हैं, भाईजान हमें integrated water management चाहिए. और कोई तरीका ही नहीं है कि पाकिस्तान में चूँकि पानी कम है, फ्लड्स आते हैं, वो मानसून 3 महीने के लिए आता है, तब हमें पानी स्टोर करना पड़ेगा और फिर मुल्क के अंदर डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करना पड़ेगा, so there's water throughout the, इस तरह की बातें करते हैं. We need to have integrated water. And it sounds perfectly logical, yeah. But from a constitutional point of view, you can't have integrated water management. So, I mean, all the water people, the hydrologists I speak to believe that Pakistan should have integrated water management, but in many ways it's you're chasing a dream because it can never happen.
Because of 18th Amendment.
But so not exactly. Pani has always been provincial. When WAPDA was created, it was the West Pakistan Water and Power Development Authority was made during the one unit. It was a provincial subject of a West Pakistan ka Water and Power Development Authority. Somehow we've conflated this entire idea that water is a federal subject. And it may be a federal subject because of security reasons and because of other reasons. But our law doesn't support that.
And never has.
And never has. It may be one of the problems.
What he is saying is that integrated approach adopt करने में
वो मुश्किल issue आ जाएगी. So अगर हमने इस तरह की चीज़ करनी है, हमें आइन change करना पड़ेगा. But all these brilliant people who tell me that this is the solution, I sort of say you can't. And this is a question of federalism, and it sort of intersects with environmental law and things. Or यहाँ we don't have our act together, and this is a water security issue, and we need to have legally backed solutions to these problems as well. We don't say
legally backed solution to
integrated, because वरना वो आप उसमें से कुछ चीज़ नहीं निकाल सकेंगे. You keep on dreaming about integrated.
Others might want to comment on this point.
I would like to add one thing. Earlier on during Rafi's presentation, he highlighted a very good initiative. My name is Farhan. I am representing Eco Green Company as Chief Executive. We're into environmental services.
Very well.
I would like to appreciate the solution that came up with Rafi, the Canadian model. That was a very good initiative. And what they were talking about earlier, ratifying a lot of treaties, agreements without going through them. Not only for the treaties which became binding on signing them, but for treaties in other respects as well, for which we were given time. We have the example of WTO. We nosedived into WTO. We had 20 years for the implementation, and there was nothing done for that. There was no homework for World Trade Organization. There was nothing which was done to bring the industry up to speed with what there was to happen once that comes into force. So that is something that exactly that cooperative sort of environment between the federation and the provinces that has to be taken into account once we're talking about international agreements. That has to be a must.
I think one thing which strikes me in this presentation is that the need for awareness of international law in the provincial capitals. It's getting even more critical, hearing all of you. Because the provincial capitals, where you have the chief minister sitting, or the chief minister office, who is the leader of the house where legislation is made, completely lack of understanding of the treaties or the framework, and the way you see, the way you've presented an uneven application. There's a list of 14 treaties in one provincial statute, another has 18, the other one has 30.
None of the laws explain why this has 19, why this has 14, वो पांच किधर गई?
मेरा ख्याल है नहीं reasons probably जो SO को जो भी download करने में कितनी हुई उसको बना देंगे. But I think मुझे याद है जब मैं था caretaker मिनिस्टर 2013 में, तो मैंने एक नोटिफिकेशन इशू किया था ट्रीटी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन सेल्स का फॉर एवरी प्रोविंस, एंड आई इवन सेंड सम donation of books from RSI as a stack of them, if you remember, to all these centers. और अभी listening to all of you, I think they need to be strengthened further. अभी शायद कोई ऐसा काम कर रहा है, but एक rudimentary just cell बना हुआ है. But I think LUMS, बाकी entities or other think tanks can strengthen those to create this understanding कि आपके पास ये legal mandate है for this, because on the territory of province to implement होना है. Federal government is confined to province है. वो समझता है कि फॉरेन ऑफिस ने सारा काम करना है रिलेटिंग टू इम्प्लीमेंटेशन. प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट थिंग्स ये हमारी जॉब डिस्क्रिप्शन है ही. सो आई थिंक वो एक एरिया जस्ट नीड्स टू बी स्ट्रेंथन, द प्रोविंशियल कैपेसिटी ऑफ अवेयरनेस ऑफ इंटरनेशनल ऑब्लिगेशंस.
I would like to ask one question from Mr. Rafiq. But I understood from your presentation and your model that the power should be distributed to the province level and the local level, and then they can implement it. But even you, from the last 20 years or 30 years, we have environmental law, the PEEP Act is there, but it's not implemented, neither is enforced. So what is the reason behind this thing? How we can enforce it?
Capacity issues are one of the reasons we don't enforce it. Also, as Fahad rightly illustrated, I don't think people understand just how wide the scope of environmental law is.
Yeah.
We very much, as a question of practice, environmental law in Pakistan is industrial pollution control. शहरों के अंदर इंडस्ट्री थी, तो इंडस्ट्रियल यूनिट्स की पोल्यूशन होती थी, तो हमारे जो EPA इदारे हैं, they're focused on urban ये industrial pollution control. But if you ask them about pesticides or agricultural runoff or this flora fauna, the EPA people don't know. So it is a question of capacity and appreciation of just how wide environment is. And capacity के हवाले से right now the sanction strength of the Environment Protection Agency is between 8 and 900, but it currently has a strength of about 300. You put that in context, a city like Lahore has 9 environmental inspectors, 12,000 industrial units. So every year, dozens and hundreds of new industrial units are put up. Each one of these inspectors has to go into a site inspection report. Plus he has to do enforcement and things. So the strain on the department is too large. They can't win. So maybe that's one of the reasons why there's not implementation as well. And a third reason is that वो बुनियादी अगर आपका कानूनी वो बुनियाद आपकी ठीक नहीं है ना, तो आपकी पॉलिसी इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं हो सकेगी.
तो बुनियाद से आपकी क्या मुराद है?
जैसे पानी की पॉलिसी इन्होंने बना दी है, ठीक है जी, मुझे समझ नहीं आती what type of government passes a policy in the last couple of weeks of its term. What sort of policy is that? Policies can be changed as well, but पानी की पॉलिसी बना दी है. Where does the Council of Common Interest, where does it say in the Constitution that the Council of Common Interest can pass and approve water? It says it can regulate and create policies with respect to subjects mentioned in Part 3 of the Federal Legislative List and exercise control over institutions related thereto. उस Part 3 में जो पानी निकाल के दिखा रहे नहीं, वापडा लिखा हुआ है. CCI can regulate वापडा policy, but water policy is not वापडा policy. अब इस policy को आप नहीं implement कर सकते because it is already outside its mandate. It's a great thing to have politically. Wow, we have a water policy. पर इसको इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं कर सकते बिकॉज इसमें जो ख्वाहिशात हैं वो सूबों की जिम्मेदारियां हैं. नेशनल वाटर पॉलिसी में लिखा हुआ है आप ट्यूबवेल्स के साथ ये करेंगे, आप ग्राउंड वाटर के साथ, वो तो सूबों की जिम्मेदारी है. किसी सूबाई असेंबली के सामने ये पॉलिसी रखी हुई, किसी सूबाई काबीना से पूछा गया था भाईजान आपने ये पढ़ा है, आपने वफाकी काबीना के सामने पानी की पॉलिसी रखी हुई नहीं, वो काउंसिल ऑफ कॉमन इंटरेस्ट के सामने 8 men decided the national policy of Pakistan, which is why it doesn't mention gender in it at all.
But उसमें एक और आर्गुमेंट ये भी वो दे सकते हैं कि यूनिफॉर्मिटी हमने इंश्योर कर दी है, वरना हर
कोई फेडरेशन की बात. What is our federation? Is it uniform? Is it not uniform?
I think that's the biggest problem that we encounter, that it's all hunky-dory to come up with these policies, but अगर आपने provinces से बात नहीं की कि अगर आपको हम ये responsibility दे दें तो आपकी capacity है ये करने की, आप ownership लेंगे इस responsibility की, given the fact that we didn't ask those questions before formulating such a policy makes it in a way designed to fail.
I think there are a couple of questions on this point. इनका पहले मेरा हल्का हाथ.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for the answer. Sir, I just want to ask, because environmental law जो है, as in distinguished किया sir, कि there is techno-legal laws. कि environment का जो भी issue आया sir, वो जो सब technology available थी, लोगों ने लगा दी sir, तो लगी उसी का impact अब आना शुरू हुआ है. So do you think sir कि अब हमें जो environment का हमारा पेपर है, उसी को अगर हम फेडरल लेवल पे दोबारा ले जाएं कि वहाँ इंस्टीट्यूशंस उसके उसी तरीके के मुताबिक डेवलप हों. अब ईपीडी जो उसकी कैपेसिटी नहीं है, इनएफिशिएंसी है, दैट माइट बी पॉसिबल कि उसमें वो टेक्निकल पर्सन नहीं है, लॉयर्स भी नहीं है जो उस चीज़ को अंडरस्टैंड करें कि अब हमें ये लॉ बनाना चाहिए. सो कैन वी टेक इट बैक टू फेडरल एंड देन रिकॉन्स्टिट्यूट वी इंक्लूडेड क्लाइमेट चेंज एज वेल, पॉलिसी, वाटर पॉलिसी.
मेरी बात तो ये है कि अनफॉर्चुनेटली और फॉर्चुनेटली मैं इसकी पॉलिटिक्स के ऊपर भी कमेंट नहीं करूँगा कि वो प्रोविंशियल सिस्टम बेहतर है या फेडरल सिस्टम बेहतर है, बट अस्यूमिंग कि अगर इसको वापस जाना भी पड़े फेडरल में, इम्पॉसिबल है पॉलिटिकली. इस करंट पॉलिटिकल इन्वायरमेंट में इट्स इम्पॉसिबल टू गेट अ कंसेंसस कि आप एक इतनी मेजर चीज़ अंडू करके वापस ले जाएं फेडरल गवर्नमेंट के पास और ये फेडरल गवर्नमेंट की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी बना दें. पहली बात. दूसरी बात ये कि कैपेसिटी का इशू कुछ एरियाज में तो आई एग्री विद यू. Environmental law is a environmental sciences is a developing subject, let alone environmental law. Once the science is there, only then can the legal fraternity take a look at that science. But on certain issues, for example, लंदन की ग्रेट स्मॉग 1950 में हुई थी जब इतने लोग मरे थे. उसके बाद से मॉनिटरिंग इक्विपमेंट एग्जिस्ट करती है. हम जो आज 2017 में पिछले साल पहली बार मीटर लगाए थे, वहाँ यहाँ पे अगेन इशू की अंडरस्टैंडिंग और कैपेसिटी के इशू पे हम वापस चले जाएंगे कि मैं नंबर क्रंचिंग कर रहा था. राफे जस्ट थ्रू आउट द फिगर्स कि 12,000 फैक्ट्रीज एंड 9 इंस्पेक्टर्स. It actually comes to 3.5 units to be inspected every day if we're assuming कि Saturday को छुट्टी नहीं है, Sunday को छुट्टी नहीं है, ईद की छुट्टी नहीं है, मुहर्रम की छुट्टी नहीं है, प्रोटेस्ट की छुट्टी नहीं है, कुछ नहीं हो रहा. 365 days वो बंदा काम कर रहा है, तो उसे 3.5 यूनिट एक दिन में विजिट करना. That is the only way कि एक इंस्पेक्टर अपनी सारी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज कंप्लीट कर सकता है. Environment is a subject which has historically and today as well has been severely underfunded by the government agencies. चाहे वो प्रोविंशियल लेवल पे बात करें या चाहे हम तब चले जाएं जब ये फेडरल था, तब भी अंडरफंडिंग और कैपेसिटी का इशू वहीं था. प्रोविंशियल हो गया तब भी अंडरफंडिंग और कैपेसिटी का इशू वहीं का वहीं है. ये चीज़ें पॉलिटिकल विल्स की बेसिस के ऊपर चल सकती हैं. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, पंजाब फूड अथॉरिटी ओवरनाइट हमने देखा है कि एक अथॉरिटी कहाँ से कहाँ गई है. क्यों? बिकॉज यू थ्रू मनी एट. That's as simple as that. That's how things work.
There are two more questions in relation to this issue, and then we can transition to another topic relating to the environment, because Fahad raised some interesting points, and maybe we should discuss those points as well. But there are two questions, and perhaps keep them brief and respond promptly as well.
आप इनके भी सवाल
जी, इन दोनों का है. अच्छा, आपको सॉरी, आपको
क्यों सवाल?
हमारे पास लॉ मैंने देखे बहुत सारे बने हुए एनवायरमेंट में 1935 से ऊपर के बनते आ रहे हैं. न्यूक्लियर जो पावर प्लांट्स हम यहाँ पर लगाए हुए हैं, ये फेडरल सब्जेक्ट जैसे डिस्कस हुआ आप लोगों ने बताया. अब अगर एक न्यूक्लियर पावर प्लांट लगा हुआ है और एक मिलिट्री उसको कर रही है, तो मिलिट्री को आप डिस्कस नहीं कर सकते प्रॉब्लम यहाँ ये बहुत बड़ी है. ठीक हो गया. तो न्यूक्लियर पावर प्लांट से जो है वेस्ट में निकल रहा है, तो फेडरल इशू हो गया, जबकि वो प्रोविंस में हो रहा है. इसको हम किस तरह देखते हैं और किस तरह इसको हम जो है इसको हम ठीक कर सकते हैं. तो ये चीज़ होगी. दूसरा, एनवायरमेंट ट्रिब्यूनल के बारे से हमारे एक टीचर कह रहे हैं अपना, हमारे साथ हैं आप लोग, उसमें आपने बताया एनवायरमेंट ट्रिब्यूनल के बारे से 2008 जो मैंने फिगर्स कलेक्ट किए, 2008, 2006, 2009, 2011-12 4-5 साल का की जो है ना इसका जो हेड है वो पॉइंट नहीं किया जा सका और इसने काम नहीं किया। इसके हवाले से बताएं कि इसको हम किस तरह इंश्योर कर सकते हैं फेडरल लेवल पर और प्रोविंशियल लेवल पे। फिर इसकी जो अपॉइंटमेंट जो अथॉरिटी है वो फेडरल के पास है, मैंने जो पढ़ा जहाँ तक मैंने देखा इसको। उसके बाद हमारे पास जो केसेस हमने रजिस्टर्ड किए 2002 तक वो 250 केसेस थे जो हमारे ट्रिब्यूनल में गए, जिसमें से 435 18% जो है वो डिसाइड हुए। उसमें जो फाइन किया वो 9.9 मिलियन 10 मिलियन के बीच में 1.9 मिलियन रिकवर हुआ सर्विस से। और इस अदारे को चलाते हुए 2.3 मिलियन जो है पहले पोस्ट आ रहा है। इसके बारे में
जब
क्या
क्लाइंट्स आते थे तो मैं कहता था फिक्र ना करिए।
I think I guess there's a lot of questions that have been raised and perhaps
बाकी दो भी ले
जी बाकी दो भी I think it's best to जी kindly
My question is, can we use SDGs to implement international environmental laws and policies?
तीसरा
and
मैंने
Afri.
What can we further do for this very smog and all this pollution case which is actually right now? What can we? Can we go like a mullah strike or something?
That did actually help a lot because if you see during that 3 days the AQI was considerably less.
बारिश हो गई और 4 दिन गाड़ी कोई नहीं निकली, इंडस्ट्री कोई नहीं चली, बहुत शहर साफ हो गया था। Maybe we need to employ those.
I just want to add something. I think जब 9/11 हुआ था तब कोई एयरलाइंस नहीं चल रही थी, so वहाँ पे one person did a research on air quality or something like that. So these kinds of events can be a point
Blessing in
that we can do some research.
Just like to
सर मैं थोड़ा सा इसमें ऐड करना चाहूँगी अपने एरिया के हवाले से।
आपका तारुफ नहीं हुआ आपको
फरवत सदर पाकिस्तान सस्टेनेबिलिटी
आरिफा राना एडवोकेट हूँ, प्रोफेशन डूइंग सर मैं अपने एरिया के हवाले से कुछ बात करना चाहूँगी। आई बिलोंग टू बेसिकली भावलपुर में जब वाटर फिल्ट्रेशन प्लांट लगे थे उस वक्त इन्वायरमेंटल वालों ने कहा था कि यहाँ पे आर्सेनिक लेवल 55 है, क्योंकि वहाँ पे मोस्टली ज़मीन का पानी जो है वो खारा आता है। रिसेंटली एक जो सुनने में आया है एक नई स्टडी, वो लेवल जो है वो 88 से 80 तक चला गया हुआ है और जितने भी वाटर फिल्ट्रेशन प्लांट हैं वो इस टाइम नाकारा पड़े हैं, मतलब दे आर नॉट इन वर्किंग कंडीशन।
वैसे आपको बता दूं जो नॉर्मल फिल्ट्रेशन प्लांट होता है वो आर्सेनिक का कुछ नहीं कर सकता इन एनी केस।
वहाँ पे और भी बहुत सारे पानी के हवाले से इशू है, मोस्टली वहाँ पे जो किडनी डिजीजेज हैं जो पानी से डेवलप होती हैं वो बहुत ज़्यादा हैं वहाँ पे, तो वी आर ईगरली नीड दैट कि वो काम करें। हम यहाँ यही बात कर रहे हैं कि कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग नहीं है और हमारे पास रिसोर्सेज नहीं है, मतलब जो आपने पहले इनपुट दिया हुआ है आप उसको तो चालू कर लो, तो उसके बारे में सर
I think there are a lot of questions, but it links to the point I wanted to make in terms of segueing into a newer topic here, is that, and Fahad raised this, कि ये जो environmental law की domain जो है, it's not that clear because you're looking at human rights law, you're looking at industrial pollution, you're looking at so many other areas, and उसके context में pollution की भी बात हो रही है, उसमें industry आ रही है, perhaps वजाहत हो सकती है थोड़ी सी in answering these questions that have been raised.
मैं अगर अपना एक पर्सनल ओपिनियन इसके ऊपर and again everyone can disagree with me clearly on this. In my view हम जब भी बैठ के सोचते हैं कि दुनिया के मसाइल क्या हैं, चाहे वो हम एम्प्लॉयमेंट पे जाएं, चाहे पॉपुलेशन कंट्रोल की बात करें, जिस मर्जी किस्म का इशू ढूंढें, definition हमने environment की देखी. In my personal opinion, environment is actually that one parent issue which can bind all of these things together and bring them under one umbrella. Because अगर आप environmental concerns को priority 1 पे रख लेंगे, आपकी population control का issue वहाँ पे relevant हो जाएगा, water quality relevant हो जाएगी, air quality relevant हो जाएगी, water quality, air quality के साथ industry आपकी relevant हो जाएगी, आपकी industry की capacity building relevant हो जाएगी. In my view, ये जो हमारा एक subject है, चाहे from a legal or an administrative standpoint, जो कि बिल्कुल ही इस वक्त back burner पे पड़ा हुआ है, this needs to actually be the number one issue that we are funding on a federal and a provincial level and addressing on a federal and provincial level. Every other thing kind of gels in under the issue of environment. मेरा इसमें पर्सनल, अगर हम वे फॉरवर्ड के बारे में सोचें, अगर हम सोचें कि इन सब का क्या किया जा सकता है, पहली बात तो ये कि एक पॉलिटिकल विल हमारी बननी ज़रूरी है, जो कि सिर्फ हम RSI के इधर जो 100-50 बंदा बैठा हुआ है, ये हमारे दरमियान नहीं पॉलिटिकल विल बनती। ये पॉलिटिकल विल
पब्लिक एट लार्ज में जब तक नहीं बनती, ये शिफ्ट नहीं आ सकता। सो द फर्स्ट and foremost responsibility which all of us have before we turn off our taps while brushing or stop washing our cars with running water is start talking to people about the environment. This is something that we simply do not do because it's a boring topic. It's not a very good conversational tool when you're sitting in social gatherings. So we have to start by prioritizing the environment. Everything else, in my personal opinion, will follow.
Excellent point. I think there were questions raised, and I think not all of them have been answered. There was perhaps some of you can answer. Yeah.
Environmental tribunal, but I'd like Rafi to comment actually.
You're only as good as your teacher. Right? So there's a variety of colorful people that have gone through the tribunal, and a variety of colorful jurisprudence that has emerged from it. But there is a lot to be said for stability. I think we have an incumbent now who's here for a few years. It takes a while for judges to come from additional district and sessions judge we have currently. Previously people have come from the IP background, very criminal lawyer ones. Really no experience in environment. So it takes them a while.
High Court judge who only heard NAP cases heading the tribunal at one point in time.
He did a great job. Once he got it, he did a great job. It took him a while. So I think for the tribunal to properly work, we need to have that continuity. Right now there's a chairman, one general member and a vacant seat for a technical member. Because this is a technical subject, it requires a tribunal, so you will have 2 generalists and 1 specialist. It's necessary because no 2 environment cases are the same. There was an ice factory being called this morning. I was at the tribunal. Ice factory कौन सी pollution करती है? मैं तो coal mining करता हूँ, मैं petroleum products इस तरह की, and those are all completely different technologies as well. So the tribunal has to be very versatile this way as well. It's a high capacity job to have. And बात आपकी बिल्कुल ठीक है, turnover बहुत कम था, लेकिन अब बेहतर हो रहा है. Now the penalties are increasing and the recovery is also increasing. You'll find that the statistics are now वो update करें पिछले 2 साल में काफी update हो गए.
I think Ali, you also wanted to say something.
All right. Okay. Thank you, first of all, Rafi and Fahad, who were absolutely brilliant presentations. But just to add to what has not been stated so far, and a lot has been stated so far, so there's not much that I can add at this point. One of the things that I would perhaps like to discuss further, which is what Rafi raised. Rafi gave an excellent history of the development of, constitutional norms in Pakistan. But at the same time, we've also got to understand the evolution and progression of international law and how the expectations from Pakistan of complying with that international law has changed. So for the first time, you had the 1972 Stockholm Declaration, which really inaugurated the entire age of international multilateral economic agreements, right? And you had subsequently a lot of plethora of MEEs which have followed, right? So I think it's important for us to understand the exact relationship between municipal law, which is domestic law, and international law. And I think it's within this space that we have to situate that issue of federalism and then try to find a compromise, which is why I like that approach of cooperative federalism. I think that's the pathway, moving forward. It cannot be done just by the provinces alone. You need a coordinating mechanism, something which Mr. Sufi actually recommended when he was heading the long history as the interim federal minister. In fact, we even issued a notification. We even handed out books to the people who we expected, and this was what, 5 years ago? Yeah. So had this been heeded 5 years ago, today we would have, we probably would be having
some work is going on.
So that's the first point. So that's the first point I wanted to make. That yes, we have a rich history and tradition, around the idea of federalism, but you have to situate that within, the history and evolution of international law as well, and a lot has changed. Secondly, you've got to be wondering about why there are just 14 treaties, in the Pakistan Environmental Protection Act. I just think that after that, look at the dates. So there is no agreement after 1997 which has been added. Can you imagine? And we have been signing so many agreements after that. That is a glaring oversight. I mean, it's what we call a schoolboy error. And why is that? That's because we just don't have any capacity, like to look at something which is so simple as that. It just takes 1 minute to update the schedule, right? So now when the GST Plus inspectors will come, evaluators will come to parks, they're going to raise these issues. It just immediately pops out all of a sudden. So I think that's why Balochistan, I think they, when they passed it, they're like, oh, there's some other, there's some other international agreements that Pakistan has also ratified. So that's why we see this, haphazard, approach that's being adopted. This needs to be absolutely fixed as soon as possible, because now, international law.
I think one venue seems to be the Inter-Provincial Coordination Ministry.
That's my pathway.
One venue for this.
So because I read the rules of business exhaustively, the Ministry of Inter-Provincial Coordination की जिम्मेदारियां क्या हैं? अभी they do the Pakistan Olympic Association is there.
Hockey Federation.
ये भी काम है. You look at their responsibilities. So नाम की वो Inter-Provincial Coordination Committee, लेकिन काम तो उनका कुछ और है. There is a lot to be said in revisiting, again in our envisioning of governance, revisiting our rules of business to see how these responsibilities should be more rationally spelled out. We can rethink what the role of a water resources ministry in a devolved system is. We can rethink what the role of a Ministry of Climate Change and say energy efficiency, what they could go together. We could rethink a lot of these things and redefine the rules of business. The government has the discretion to be able to change these. It's not a legislative act that you need. It has to be approved by cabinet. So there's room there. Certainly at the provincial level, there's room to look at these policies again. I know the government of Punjab wants to change the irrigation department into a water resources department, because there are all sorts of overlapping water concerns that can't seem to be integrated with the department approach that we have. Because water quality is dealt with by the EPA, water supply is dealt with by the irrigation department, drinking water is dealt with by public health engineering. So these different departments don't speak to each other. So there was a thought of redefining the role of the irrigation department and making it a mega department. So there's a lot of thought that might come out of this as well.
Right. So just to add one thing, for your all information, I would like to add one thing. I'm working with the government of Dubai. I'm working with the government of Dubai from the last 4 years. Okay, we have 100,000 of industries in Dubai, and we have only 30 inspectors. Only 30 inspectors, and we are controlling the whole Dubai. When I say controlling the industries, it means we are controlling the garages, the car wash garage. Even the car wash garage has been checked, and every.
Is this a management issue then?
It's the management issue. It's total the management issue. The EPA can implement it, but the problem with them is that they are not able to implement anything. Unless you don't make something a benchmark, like from today, all the wastewater from these industries will be checked and it will be implemented very strictly. Until you will not be able to do anything.
I think taking the lack of implementation point forward, recently I was involved in a case, or it's very pertinent to the environment issue, which is the banning of plastic in the province and throughout Pakistan as well. So I'm representing the cantonment boards before the Lahore High Court. और उधर ये था कि आप implementation की बात करें कि plastic bags, जो polythene bags that we use in our everyday life, it has been banned by the Lahore High Court in 2009, and there is a specific reported judgment, a very detailed judgment regarding that issue. और उन्होंने ये भी कह दिया उस जजमेंट में कि कोई भी आम शहरी, ये बैक इन 2009 की जजमेंट है, और कंटेम्प्ट की भी फाइल कर सकते हैं कोई बंदा, कोई भी रेट फाइल कर सकता है अगर ये 6 महीने में प्लास्टिक बैग्स वाइप आउट नहीं होते, which are eternally harmful and injurious for the environment overseas. अब आके 2011 में पहले कंटोनमेंट बोर्ड्स ने बैन किए प्लास्टिक बैग्स, उस पर जी रेट चली गई और रेट जो है 4 साल रेट चलती रही और एंड पे डिसमिस फॉर नॉन प्रोसिक्यूशन. अभी फिर उन्होंने बैन किए और मेरे ख्याल से पिछले कुछ 6 महीनों से वो रेट चली, डिस्पाइट देयर बीइंग अ रिपोर्टेड जजमेंट ऑफ द लाहौर हाई कोर्ट, वो नहीं कर रहे इम्प्लीमेंट. उसके अलावा इसके यहाँ पे ऑर्डिनेंस भी है जो पंजाब प्रोहिबिशन ऑन पॉलीथीन बैग्स ऑर्डिनेंस, उसकी भी लैक ऑफ इम्प्लीमेंटेशन। उसके बाद इस्लामाबाद में आपका जो मतलब इन लॉ बताना चाह रहे हैं कि इन लॉ देयर इज एवरीथिंग ओवर देयर। इस्लामाबाद में रेगुलेशंस आए 2013 के EPA एनवायरनमेंट प्रोटेक्शन एक्ट के अंडर कि जिसने बैन कर दिया प्लास्टिक बैग्स को, उसकी कोई इम्प्लीमेंटेशन नहीं हो रही। तो इसको हमें बेसिक मसला जो मैनेजमेंट के अलावा आता है वो आता है इम्प्लीमेंटेशन का। जब तक इम्प्लीमेंटेशन ही लॉज के होने से तब कुछ नहीं हो सकता। अभी बात कर रहे थे हम उसकी GSP+ स्टेटस की, तो पाकिस्तान ने बड़ी ज़्यादा ट्रीटीज रेटिफाई की थी फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम, ICCPR, ICSR, जब हमें GSP+ स्टेटस मिला था। उसमें से एक थी आपकी कन्वेंशन और राइट्स ऑफ चिल्ड्रन एज वेल। अभी 2018 में आके उसका एक नया एक्ट आया जिसे हम जुवेनाइल जस्टिस सिस्टम एक्ट कहते हैं, और उसको उस पर स्पेसिफिकली लिखा हुआ है कि इसलिए बनाए क्योंकि हमारी इंटरनेशनल कमिटमेंट्स हैं। लेकिन अभी तक कुछ 6, 7, 8 महीने गुजर गए, उस पर एक भी जो मेरे ख्याल से इम्प्लीमेंट चीज़ हुई हो। तो मेन इशू आई थिंक जो हम एनवायरनमेंट की भी बात करते हैं, इसमें इम्प्लीमेंटेशन का इशू आ जाता है। और जब तक अक्रॉस द बोर्ड इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, दूसरा पॉइंट जो सूफी साहब से मैं टोटली एग्री करता हूँ कि प्रोविंशियल कैपिटल्स में भी इंटरनेशनल लॉ को हमें आगे लेके चलना चाहिए। एंड आई एम सर्विंग एज द चेयरपर्सन ऑफ द इंटरनेशनल लीगल अफेयर्स कमेटी, द लाहौर हाई कोर्ट बार एसोसिएशन, और फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम हमने वहाँ पे एक इंटरनेशनल लॉ की प्रॉपर, जिसमें सूफी साहब रेज कि हमने ट्रेनिंग दी उनको, लॉयर्स को एंड स्टूडेंट्स को, कि इंटरनेशनल लॉ होता क्या है, व्हाट ट्रीटीज ऑल अबाउट। तो इस तरह की ट्रेनिंग्स की एजुकेशन हो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा, ताकि वो जो चीफ मिनिस्टर साहब बैठे हुए हैं और जिनको खुद इतना ज़्यादा नहीं पता होगा, और प्रोविंशियल लेवल्स पे भी उनकी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन की जाए।
इस पे मैं I just want to also perhaps comment because I have this urge to speak as well, and it might be a question actually. एक तो I agree with echo the sentiment shared by Ali about, because what I see is when Rafi and Fahad were talking about and or others and questions were being raised, and naturally this is RSIL, so our focus has been on international law, is that to understand environmental protection, environmental law domestically, domestic mechanisms, right? And going back to Ali's point, so for example, Rafi also talked about Germany perhaps entering into some form of an arrangement with, as a sub-national, provinces in a European context, but the thing is that under international law, under the Vienna Convention on treaties, states enter into arrangement. So Pakistan or Germany, at the end of the day, they might have mechanisms internally to basically coordinate in certain ways, but eventually the state of Germany, Republic of Germany, is responsible for its international commitments, especially when that environmental question transcends borders, like water, transboundary rivers, air pollution. So that's one thing. The other question, perhaps it's a question, or it's just a thought really, that we seem to be addressing environmental issues from a peace context, right? So, these are all issues that happen in a country that is developing and that's different, concerns, population, health. But for example, Pakistan is a signatory to UNMOD, which is, a convention that deals with conflict, how to protect the environment during conflict. And I don't see any discourse on that because our military is fighting a war in a region that we have no access to, and how is the environment being impacted in that region? No questions are raised regarding that. So that's a question, perhaps someone knows about this, but and it sort of links to the nuclear issue as well. That was a federalism related issue, but in terms of it is a security concern and an energy concern to an extent. So perhaps if someone would comment on that, and then I think there are other questions that need to be addressed.
I think it's uncontrovertible that a bomb causes adverse environmental effect. I don't think we need to right. But I wanted to make a comment about the development of our environmental laws, because I appreciate the comment that international law also moves. आप enforcement की बात कर रहे थे, हमारे पास जैसे मैंने कहा industrial pollution control का कानून है, which applies the polluter pays principle. It's what we refer to as an end of the pipe mechanism of controlling pollution. कि जी जहाँ polluter where he's discharging, end of the pipe, that's what we regulate, and that's where we punish people, and we try and get money from the person who are punishing. Polluter pays principle. ये framework चल सकता है? Is it right for us? Because of the 12,000 industrial units here in Punjab, ना उनके पास ज़मीन या पैसे हैं polluter pays या pollution control करने के लिए, तो हम अपने demographic, social demographic के अंदर इसको इस्तेमाल कर भी सकते हैं कि एक ये सवाल उठता है। दूसरा, other countries that have applied end of pipe solutions have also developed their environmental laws going forward. there is this concept beyond just punishing people where environmental sustainability forms part of economic policy. This has been done in places where we see sustainability, resource efficiency and cleaner production are the words that are being used. So जहाँ cleaner production है, it means कि किसी ने फैसला किया कि हम GDP per unit of GDP हम इतने resources खाते हैं. And if we want to be more efficient and only consume so many resources to produce a unit of GDP, that's when environment becomes an economic question. And it moves beyond just punishing people and it starts rewarding them as well. Because a lot of the things environmental regulation requires is cost. Treatment plants are not cheap. We're a poor country. So how are you going to get treatment plants by treating the people who can afford them like criminals?
Right.
It's going to be difficult. So we need to move our environmental laws forward as well to the 21st century.
I think, Aisha, you had a question? Yeah. Sorry, Unka Bala.
Firstly, thank you for the talks. They were really, really informative. I think we've talked a lot about the political will and that being lacking, and I think that would apply even with the federalism versus the devolution model. So even the Canadian problem, I think, would have like an impact, like that would have an impact on that. And especially because we're just passing these laws, right? So we're guys like, vomiting them out, and then we're going to these meetings to the EU, and we're like, look, we've been such a good boy, we've passed all of these laws, and we're doing it all. And the problem is that implementation, like someone was saying, so where do we go with the judicial? Like, should we be flooding the courts with these cases, like you're doing? Should we be saying, like, this hasn't been implemented, you said you would do this, and you haven't been, like, we've seen that Salim Akhtar, he was, a pioneer in, like, taking on these cases and giving, like, great judgments that we can rely on today. Like, where is that now?
I think judicial, I think judicial will is very important because a lot of cases, a lot of things which are unnoticed otherwise. This is Smog ka issue. Smog ka issue all started from the case Waleed Iqbal versus. It all started from there, and now it is a very pertinent issue. इसमें policies बननी है, इसमें सब कुछ बन रहा है. उसके अलावा जैसे policy bags का जिसमें example दी वो I think थोड़ा सा गलत हो गया. वो हम भी लेके गए, वो हमारे खिलाफ गए हुए बड़े बेंचेस कि हमें ban कर दिया हमारा right to business and stuff, despite there being a judgment on that issue. तो judicial will, I think, जैसे right to life को शहरा ज़िया में बड़ा कि right to life is not just right to live and everything else. It's a right to a dignified life which includes a healthy environment and everything else. तो इसको बड़ा मेरे ख्याल से vast उन्होंने.
Has the judiciary today, like, has it kept that up?
I think फिर वही फहद बनवा, it depends on judges. It depends on individual.
At times it has. There is a judgment of the Supreme Court which says that in EIA for a road construction project which bases its mitigating measures on a poultry farm is perfectly fine. We have a Supreme Court judgment saying that.
High Court judgment saying a coal-fired plant is perfectly okay.
So you have those judgments and then you have these judgments. I mean, we are in a predicament.
If I can just add to what is being said in this context, I think our gut instinct always is to focus on the high courts and the Supreme Court, and then taking public interest litigation and pro-moral action. That can work, on large-scale, big-scale projects, but predominantly, like most of the environmental issues, they should be going to the, to the environmental tribunals and the lower courts. So we focus more on them delivering environmental justice rather than expecting the high court to step in. Because you can also remember one thing, which is a bit of a limitation when it comes to the courts being at the forefront of enforcing environmental justice. Courts, by nature, are supposed to be reactive. They cannot be proactive or precautionary or preemptive. A lot of environmental issues are slow burn issues. You have to take preemptive, precautionary measures. Do not expect so much from the courts that that we're now comfortable delegating everything to these 3 or 4 stalwart judges, who just intermittently crop up on our
that is the best answer to that question. Yeah.
So, focus, like bring reforms, like large scale reforms. And one last thing, that has to do with capacity building. Students introduce environmental law, courses, all, sort of LLB, LLM levels, But I think that, certainly 1 or 2 generations before us, the environmental movement really in the world took off late 60s, early 70s. You know, if you look at the history of the social movement, you know, at least in modern terms. So I think, you know, like our generation or the next generation would be even more alive to these issues. So there is room for being, there is some space for optimism.
I think that
as
has
well.
been more because of lack of choice, because the situation would have come to a point where you have to prioritize it.
That's right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I think adding to that moment, actually, I would say that incorporating those environmental issues at the very early stage of the child's development should be the way forward. Because at this moment of time in our generation, it's very difficult for a person to mold into this.
Right now, there is fluoridation syllabus.
Yes, because if
environment is still not a compulsory subject.
It's not a compulsory subject because having choice.
I agree with this. I'm actually working in energy efficiency and I think you picked on that. And that is one of the key areas which we believe is change to management. Behavioral change भी कर रहे हैं, आप appliances को भी कर रहे हैं, आप industry को भी hit कर रहे हैं, you're trying to reduce gas emissions. Syllabus की आप इसमें दाखिल curriculum introduce करें, we're also trying to work on that because we do believe कि grade 3, 4 से आप शुरू करें because this is behavioral change and we didn't know about it. WWF एक होता था जो
अभी भी होता
I know that, and I'm working but I'm saying the 90s was I know that.
You know what?
Of course, I'm saying the president. But I'm saying when we were kids in the 90s, हम तब से सुनते थे but this is something we need to introduce in syllabus.
I think we will come over.
We will collaborate on that.
इस वक्त सिचुएशन ये है कि आज भी in the most, you know, elitist and pompous institute of this city, environment is still an elective subject of law. It's as simple as
I go to judges and this is
Yes,
I think we can take a few more questions. People who haven't spoken, I think that's yeah. So we're ending in 5 minutes. So I think आपका कुछ चाय पे भी हम कर लेंगे because आज जी आप.
I've got a couple of points. My name is Ali. I'm actually an environmental consultant, and I've been involved in lots of PIAs and ESAs for different but this is I'm like a fish out of water right now. But I've got a couple of points. First of all, I just came across this, the world's largest airport purifier, which is based in China. It's 100 meter high structure, and it reduces PM 2.5 related to smog by 20%. It's a city of 8 million people, but in order to cater to all of the population, not just reducing, but eliminating everything, by doing 100 more houses.
Okay. What's the cost of one tower? That has to be the national exhibition.
But my point is, for a country of 1.4 billion, which is China, such millions cannot even escape. But in a city like yours, should we be promoting such initiatives like, you talked about giving alternatives to farmers who don't have any other option other than that. We could ask the government or maybe judiciary could help in this, formulate policies and laws and guidelines to, do some measures like that, which can actually do something realistic on ground. And, it was helpful to be practicalities. So, number two, my point is that mobilizing the government, firstly, and their citizens as well, to proactively addressing air pollution concerns and issues, is the most crucial thing and challenge in this new economy. I'm not using the word new economy, we work on economy. And number two, lastly, Rafi just mentioned High Court verdict by I may have been involved in that one at Saigon.
Which side? That's what had the EIF.
Yes. And there was a Yusufallah, right? Yusufallah. That place has lots of agriculture, rich, fertile land, canals, sprawling through, and they also have the veterinary farms over there. So they actually breed these cows for milking and stuff, etc. my point was, how could, I knew while I was a consultant working on a project that this would destroy this environment, and these people's health will be deteriorated, and the airport cannot do this. So what my personal input was, which I'm really proud of, was that I consulted US EPA's guidelines for that, for parts, and there was a clause regarding the mercury levels, and we inserted that and we put in a disclaimer that you need to consider this before constructing. This being constructed, I don't know whether they did it or not.
No, Jalrah.
But what about the High Court verdict?
High Court okay.
So what does one do when even the High Courts and the Supreme Court say, okay, you go?
Environmental law has never stopped a project in Pakistan.
Yes, true.
The stuff that has been stopped was stopped because of the doctrine of public trust. Not Section 12 of the Environment Protection has never stopped a project in Pakistan. The only notable project that was stopped was was Dungi Ground. Dungi Ground. That was stopped. But otherwise, all the Fahad ne kaam kiya, wo Supreme Court ne overturn kar diya. Orange Line ka case था, Supreme Court ने कर दिया.
ये जो सिग्नल फ्री कॉरिडोर है, ये जो मैं जिस EIA का जिक्र कर रहा था, इसकी जो EIA बनाई गई थी फॉर द सिग्नल फ्री कॉरिडोर, so EIA is an environmental impact assessment report which has to be submitted for certain types of projects, or projects which are obviously going to have an environmental impact. There's another document that there's another research that can be done which is called the initial environmental examination, which is to see कि क्या damage होगा कहीं. The key difference between the two is that an EIA presupposes that there will be some damage to the environment. Hence, you have to give mitigating measures in that EIA. Signal free corridor की जो EIA थी, जो भी उसका कंसल्टेंट था, उसने लिटरली पोल्ट्री फार्म की मिटिगेटिंग मेजर्स उठा के वहाँ पे डाल दिए थे, बिकॉज उसमें लिखा हुआ था कि फीड आपने स्पिल नहीं होने देनी, जो आपने कूट है उसको इस तरह वहाँ से रिमूव कराना है, स्टफ लाइक दैट. That EIA was signed off by the Supreme. It's as simple as that.
This is raised a very important question. और उसमें High Court ने, this was a question of regulatory capture. We have an environment protection agency that's staffed by government officers, and they are requested or required to adjudicate private sector projects and also government sector projects. So the question is, when they are regulating government sector projects, to what extent have they been captured, regulatory capture, where they are no longer objective? So this is a problem. This is a serious issue. But now, at the federal level, there has been more experience with regulation than at the provincial level. We have the PEMRAs and the OGRAs and the ACCPs. And I found that in each of these regulators, NEPRA does not answer to the Ministry of Water and Power. It answers to the establishment division. And in this way, they have a sort of Chinese wall of separation. But here in the Punjab, wherever there is a regulatory body, it reports to its parent body.
It needs to be designated.
So here, because the experience of regulation at the provincial level isn't as robust as it has been at the federal level, maybe there are lessons to be learned in the Punjab on how to do it.
Yeah, I think that's where the High Court and Supreme Court potentially need to be brought to taking up in चीजों के guidelines.
और सर वो जज्बाती जजेस होते हैं ना, ये मुझे बड़ा होता है कि मैं
फिर क्या यार?
जज के पास जाता हूँ, जज कहता है नहीं मैं माहौल को सेव करना चाहता हूँ, भी मैं नहीं सुनूंगा. भाई देखिए, if you have a tax case and you go and say सर हमें नोटिस नहीं दिया गया, हमें hearing नहीं दी गई, और देखिए हमें ये टैक्स नोटिस 4 ट्रिलियन का दिया गया और जज आपको कहे नहीं मैं नेशनल एक्सचेकर को बचाना चाहता हूँ. That's not a judicial answer. I want a lot more professional. There is a lot of legal work in environmental law which is glossed over जब हम इस जज्बे में आ जाते हैं, अगर पानी बचाते हैं.
There is not that. This question is point regarding alternative technologies as also far they have. You might definitely be familiar with the technology transfer department which exists in the Environment Protection University. And if someone of majority of you might have gone through the small commission report that which will be uploaded on the website, one of the major constituents of that small is the diesel engines or the diesel gensets which have been made. So this is just a thought-provoking comment that I would like to add. Shouldn't that technology transfer department of the Environment Protection Agency have certain certified vendors for certain products
Like Jen says, if I want to set up an industry and I want a backup power generation because there are power outages, shouldn't I go to EPA and ask them which is the vendor which is going to comply or any PGs, etc. So that technology transfer department, unfortunately, is nowhere to be found. It's totally dysfunctional at the moment. And another thing that, very important thing that was one of the major points that came up again and again in that small commission report was the lack of data, the lack of ambient air monitoring reports or available with the department and the stations there on no doubt they're short on finances, they're short on equipment and all that. But roughly speaking, EPA receives what about 1,000, 1,200 odd reports every year, EIE and IE from all over Punjab. Don't they ask this specifically to submit the baseline monitoring reports in that? And that is primary data. Maybe, yes, maybe 20%, 25%, 30% of those may be fake reports. They may be not up to the mark. But can that primary data help them in forming a profile of different provinces or different cities or districts in Punjab, which might have been reflected in the small commission report? So that is, again linking to your question, it's again it definitely is a management issue. But along with the implementation, it definitely is a management issue.
This is a very fair point that if, even 20 to 30% of those EIAs and IEEs are giving reliable baseline data, that needs to be compiled by someone at some point. That's very massive.
Amin has just one last question.
Yeah, so a very basic question, being a non-law student. I really wanted to know that you talked about the lack of awareness among the public and the provincial level of international law and environmental law. And you discussed that the way to go about it is to discuss environmental law in your gathering. So is it the only way to go about it? And I really wanted to know how countries, you talked about Canada and Germany, are tackling this particular issue.
Okay, so basically my question is the thing is that the other day I was studying, my name is Mariam Zahid, I am in second year of LLB from the Harvard University. So basically there is this hazard environmental scale on Google, and if you for countries like Canada it's 48, for UK it's 40, but for Lahore it's 340, which is in the red zone. It is an alarming situation for, I think, citizens from Lahore basically. I think they're probably sleeping because the effects that this smog is going to have are going to be shown in another 10 years. This is right. It's not an alarming situation, but it is. And the thing is that there is nobody's even if you think about those Miniso masks, they're better. But if you get those Xiaomi air purifiers, which have this carbon monoxide that filters in it and all, not everybody is going to just buy it.
Not everyone can afford it.
If we don't have food to eat, why do you think we go and buy 4,000 ka?
And जिस बंदे ने साइकिल पे या बाइक पे दफ्तर जाना है, he doesn't have a choice.
I think at some level we have to stop chasing this dream that environmental awareness will happen. I think you just pitch it as a health issue. You stop saying that this pollutant will cause smog. You say that this smog will cause cancer. Shift the conversation, because it is. It will. Just make it a health.
And one more very important thing that Parth pointed out when he was talking about the losses that we are facing. I was astonished, I didn't know about this, but there is 67 billion per annum. That indoor air quality is causing it. So that is
indoor air quality.
And there are no standards. There are no standards in Pakistan for indoor air quality. We don't even know that is what's impacting our air.
So I'd like to thank everyone for this interactive session. We can carry this round of applause for everyone. We can carry this discussion.
Sorry? Just have one little announcement.
Oh, one little announcement.
Yes.
Please.
So I'd like to thank this team panel over here for stimulating our legal minds. And of course, I'm sure all of you are not only legally empowered in light of environmental law, but international law as well. And that's the purpose that RSIL has always been trying to achieve. But of course, before we break off your tea, I would like to call upon the president of RSIL, Sir Ahmed Bilal Sufi, to facilitate the certification distribution ceremony.